this is the size of the image that we're going to make a print of. So we don't need a vast amount of paper, and so we have to cut our paper to size. Now, for this image, I reckon that we need about 4 centimeters, and the image is 10. So that gives us 18 centimeters all round. Now what I'm doing is making a layout for the paper that we're going to print on, because we want to get the paper down in a suitable place before we print, so that we know where it's going. We want to some kind of sign, and then we want to be able to put the little plate exactly into the middle of the paper, and we can position the plate, which we're going to make our print on, exactly in the middle. Start by doing by eye, and then check with the ruler that it's equidistant. Eye is sometimes better than anything else, and we've actually got it in the middle. So then we do the same thing. We draw firmly round the plate, so that when I put a piece of tissue on top, the whole of the layout through the tissue, and that's the way we're going to use it. So now we're ready to deal with the actual plate, but we have to remember that dry paper like this, especially when it's very thick, is not going to push into the channels and little holes on the plate. So we have to take the paper and wet it. And so I'm going to put the paper into the water, and I will leave it there. Now, this is the copper plate that we're going to use to put our image onto. And there is a very special thing that we have to think about, is that this copper plate is going to go onto the press with our paper on top and our ink on the plate between two rollers with enormous pressure. And if this edge, which you can see there, is too sharp, it could cut both your paper and your rollers. And if the corners are too sharp, you really could be in enormous trouble. As you can see, I've filed this side. You can see that there's no surface there visible, and I've rounded the corners. So I'm going to demonstrate how I file down this bit. And the file works better going away from me. So we're going to file it. So I've taken the corner off. And you have to remember that printmaking needs quite a brawn. I don't know if I have any, but I have habit behind me. And so I've now got a rounded edge, but I've still got this very sharp side on the plate. So as I don't have a vast amount of brawn, I cheat. And I have a large sander with emery paper on it. Until you no longer see a lot of edge on that. And then I'm also going to do something which I learned in Edinburgh Printmakers, which helps to keep the ground on the plate. I'm going to put what they call a tooth over the surface of the plate. Too different, but it actually will hold the liquid of the liquid ground we're going to put on. So this is the plate ready for us to go to the next stage. Now the next stage is what we call degreasing. The problem with metal is that there's a certain amount of grease from one's hands, from the environment or whatever. And if you have a water or whatever, you can see it doesn't stay on the metal. So as our ground is going to be liquid, it wouldn't stay on the surface. So we have to take that little bit of grease off. And the way we do it here is we put some fairy liquid, which is just a spreading medium, onto the plate. We have enough there. And we mix that with vinegar, which is an acid which breaks down the grease. And so we cover that with white vinegar. You can use any vinegar, salad vinegar or whatever, and you use pretty hot water, and that's pretty soapy. And I'm going to rub really, really, really hard, and you see the sort of natural corrosive shadows on the plate disappear, and it becomes really nice and clean. And we then will see that I've got all the grease off by running water over the surface of the plate, and there it is. Now we have to go and dry that before we can put a ground onto the plate. The ground is going to be there to protect the copper from the acid. I have to do this very fast and not go back over it, otherwise you get streaks. This is the image that we're going to put onto the plate, and it's an image of a rose with some fingers plucking the rose. I'll tell you about the story behind it. It's called Roslein, Rot, and it's by Goethe, and that's what our image is based on. Now, to get that onto the plate, I'm using ordinary carbon paper. So I'm going to place that over our cleaned and degreased plate. I'm going to put my image down, which will take me a minute because I have to feel for the edges of the plate before I can tape it down. So I'm going to move this around until I get the edges of the plate on each side working. Now I'm taking a very strong biro, and you need to have a colour other than the grey of your pencil line, because you need to know where you have worked. So I'll work from the top, putting this image onto this plate, drawing the lines of the petals. Now the difficult thing is to make sure the thorn that is going to prick the young man looks really sharp and nasty. This is the image as it's come out through the carbon and the other layer of paper. We're going to etch it now. I'm taking a sharp tool and I'm going to draw through the lines that I have made and through the protective coating. Now, having drawn into our plate, we are going to protect the back of it before we put it into the acid, because the acid would eat away the unprotected area. So we take some ordinary carpet tape and put it very carefully down on the back of the plate. Make sure it sticks very well. You don't want to lose your whole plate in the acid. And we're going to take that over to the tank and put it into the acid. Now we are about to drop our plate into this acid. It is ferric chloride acid, which doesn't really have fumes, so it's the safest one for a private studio. And we want to make sure the plate is really well into that acid. It will eat all those little, very fine lines, as it turns out, that we made on the edges of the petals and give us a lovely line drawing. I'm going to leave it in for a long time. And now we are going to have the moment of truth. We take the plate out of the acid and we are going to wash it. Now here we are with these paper fingers again, and they are there to lift the damp paper out so I don't put finger marks on it. Here we go. Damp paper, which I'm going to give a shake to and then put it to drip up on this dripping board. Now I'm going to ink up this plate, and I'm going to start in the middle because if you start on the side you're going to get ink everywhere, and you can spread it when you're working from the middle without getting ink absolutely all around the edges and underneath your plate and everything else. We don't need a vast amount, but we're going to work it very well into the plate. First of all, we spread right out to the edges and try not to get it too much onto the paper because we'll be moving the plate around to some extent. And now we just start to work it in because there are very, very, very deep channels and they're very narrow, so we have to try and persuade the ink not to trap air bubbles. So now I'm working that ink even further in to the channels and holes in the surface of the plate, and I'm going to start to move the ink off the plate. And you can be, it's the flat of the hand that does the work. People have to forget the tips of their fingers when they're working with a plate. It's the actual action of the surface and the direction that you're moving in. Now I'm going to put that working in a piece of scrim. This is called scrim way, and I'm going to, you need a nice cushion because it's really quite light on the surface of the plate. Now because it's small, I can actually lift it up in my hand and just work in the one direction without putting too much pressure on the surface. And it's beginning to show quite well as an image, but I want to get a little bit more. Now there's a sort of shortcut we can take by using either tissue or pages of the telephone book are quite good for taking a little bit of surface ink off. And here I'm not actually pressing down, I'm just letting the cushiony bit of this move over the surface, and the ink lifts off rather nice and evenly. I think we could call that today. It's got some little cloudy bits, which is always rather fun. And we're going to do the edges, like that. And make sure there's nothing much on the back. And now we are ready to go and put it on the press, on its layout, and then take a print. Now I have placed the inked and wiped plate within the planned layout that we prepared before, and I'm bringing the drained and dried paper that's been put between blotting paper and rubbed well onto the surface of the plate. I now protect my blankets and everything else by putting several layers of tissue over that again. Now using my fingers again, I take my blankets and carefully lift them. I'm going to stand beside the press because I feel I get a much more even wind. So we're going right to the end. Now on most presses you only need to go through the press once, but I have such a long press here that it would take hours if I was going to lift the blankets back and then use the alternate side. So I'm going to wind it back. Don't need to waste. I'll just see. I'm now going to lift the blankets. I brought the press back the other way because it just happens to suit. And we are going to lift the protective tissues, and we are going to lift this very carefully and see what we have got. And we have rather a nice little print. Now what you see on the plate there is what's called a roll-up. It's a mixture of colours with Vaseline, and I've done a merge. I put them beside each other and then moved the roller as I was rolling so that each mixes with the other, and we're going to run that over the plate. We hopefully get it in the right places, but you'll see a variety of a very, very light tone, and that's it. I have the transparent colour on this roller, and I hope that I have got the mix in the right place. I usually use a smaller roller for this, but we can't find it. So 1, 2, 3, go. Now yes, the blue you can see there, the pink is there, and there's a absolute soupçon of green there. I'm putting the wet paper down as we did before, tissue on top for the image. It is there. I'm going to flip it over towards you, and you get to put an acrylic tinted aqua tint. That is what gives us the tone. There'll be lots of tiny dots, and the acid, when we put it into the acid, will eat the copper between the tiny minuscule dots. Now here we are again with our plate. We have done another process which is like masking off, but we use a liquid and a permanent marker pen to get the white areas. Then we put it in the acid, go to the medium areas, put it in the acid, take it out, go to the very deep dark. So we've masked out all of the rows and the stems and the fingers and everything else, and we've left the plate in the acid for 5 minutes for the background. That's what you're going to see. Now what I'm doing is going to put the colour all over the plate in different areas, but I'm using cotton buds because it's so small. I think the background first. Now what you see here is a fully inked and wiped colour etching. Towards you. Now that colour will go on coming up for quite some time.